Hello, what is the difference between premenstrual symptoms or premenstrual syndrome and pregnancy symptoms? How can you differentiate between premenstrual signs and pregnancy signs? Today we are talking about the difference between premenstrual symptoms and pregnancy symptoms. GERALDMASSA, the health educator, is the name of the channel. I'm really so excited to connect with you to talk about the difference between premenstrual symptoms and pregnancy symptoms. And without further ado, we shall go straight away to our differences, but after this small message. Hello, welcome to our channel. I'm GERALDMASSA, the health educator. On this channel we talk about pregnancy related questions. We answer all your pregnancy related questions. We also do talk about conditions including fertility, infertility, endometriosis, endometritis, and also we do discuss issues regarding polycystic ovarian syndrome. Let me know if you have any questions, and welcome for today's lesson. You are most welcome, and stay with me today as we talk about today's topic. Welcome. Breast pain. The first difference between premenstrual symptom and pregnancy symptom is that there is breast pain. The breast pain specifically is actually present in both the cases, but the only difference is that in premenstrual syndrome or in premenstrual symptom, the breast pain tends to stop immediately a woman sees her periods, whereas in pregnancy symptoms, the breast pain does not stop. What causes the breast pain? The breast pain is normally caused by the hormones progesterone and prolactin, but most importantly, the hormone progesterone is the #1 cause of the breast pain. So what happens is that in premenstrual syndrome, the progesterone levels keep increasing, but immediately a woman sees her periods, the progesterone levels decrease, and thus when a woman sees her periods, the breast pain stops. Whereas in pregnancy, what happens is that the breast pain does not stop. The main reason is that when a woman has conceived, when a woman has been confirmed to be pregnant, what happens is that progesterone continues to be produced by the placenta. Normally, the placenta keeps producing the progesterone, and thus the breast pain tends to increase. But later on, as a woman is going into her second trimester, that is from 4 months onwards, normally the breast pain stops. So our first difference between premenstrual symptoms and pregnancy symptoms is that there is breast pain, but the breast pain stops immediately a woman sees her periods in premenstrual syndrome, whereas in pregnancy, the breast pain does not stop. Thank you for staying with me. We are talking about the differences between premenstrual syndrome and pregnancy symptom. The name of the channel is GERALDMASSA, the health educator. We talk about women health. We talk about reproductive health. Stay with me as we move to our next difference. Bleeding. Bleeding is our next difference between premenstrual symptoms and pregnancy symptom. The only issue here is that in premenstrual syndrome, the bleeding normally is happening when a woman has seen her periods, whereas in pregnancy bleeding or as a pregnancy symptom, the bleeding normally is light. We call it spotting or implantation bleeding. So in premenstrual symptoms or in premenstrual syndrome, there is no bleeding happening actually. What happens is that the bleeding happens, but it's normally either heavy or it's actually like the normal period. Whereas in pregnancy, there's some light bleeding, but it is normally spotting. So our next difference between premenstrual syndrome and pregnancy symptom is that in pregnancy, the bleeding is just light. We call it spotting or implantation bleeding, whereas in premenstrual syndrome or in premenstrual symptom, the bleeding does not happen. It only happens when the periods have happened, when it is normal menstruation. Thank you. We are talking about the differences between premenstrual syndrome and pregnancy symptom. We shall go to our next difference, and this is mood changes. Mood changes do happen in premenstrual syndrome, but specifically, these mood changes are being brought about by the hormones that are pouring into the body as a woman is nearing her periods. But normally, these mood changes stop immediately a woman sees her periods. The mood changes are being brought about by the hormones, specifically progesterone. It's one of the predominant hormones in pregnancy and in premenstrual syndromes. But the mood changes do stop when a woman sees her periods. The difference is that in pregnancy there is mood changes, but the mood changes do not stop. They just keep increasing, and normally a woman may be happy and then experience some episodes of low moods. The only caution here is that in both premenstrual syndrome and in pregnancy, if you are a woman and you experience the mood changes and you experience long episodes of low moods, then it is very important that you see a doctor or you see a therapist and talk about what you're going through. The only thing we fear is that it could be depression or severe depression. So if you are experiencing mood changes, yes, it can be a sign of premenstrual syndrome, or it could be a sign that you are about to see your periods or that you have got pregnant. But please, if this lasts for a long time, then it is high time you see your doctor so that this can be addressed, because depression is very is not good. So in both cases there's mood changes, but the difference is that in premenstrual syndrome the mood changes stop immediately a woman sees her periods, whereas in pregnancy the mood changes do not stop. They just keep increasing, but normally they do not last for a long time. They keep alternating. Thank you. We shall move to our next point. Fatigue. Normally in premenstrual syndrome there is fatigue, but the fatigue is normally stopping when a woman sees her periods. The fatigue is being brought about by the changes that the body is experiencing towards the process of menstruation. But in pregnancy there is fatigue, but normally this fatigue tends to increase, or it tends to go throughout the pregnancy. Nausea. Both premenstrual syndrome and in pregnancy there is nausea, but normally the nausea is really not so serious in premenstrual syndrome, whereas in pregnancy the nausea may be serious. So in premenstrual syndrome there's some little nausea, but it can actually be even like a mild stomach upset, whereas in pregnancy it can be really serious. It can actually even be accompanied by vomiting. So the difference between premenstrual syndrome and pregnancy is that there's some little or slight nausea in premenstrual syndrome, whereas in pregnancy there's nausea and vomiting that is really serious. Next difference: food aversions and cravings. In premenstrual syndrome normally there are lots of food cravings. A woman will feel like eating chocolates, sweets. Actually, she will eat chocolates, sweets, sugar, but normally she's not focused on one particular food. Whereas in pregnancy, there's lots of aversions. A woman will be averted to specifically one specific type of food. A woman will be interested in one specific type of food, whereas she will develop a strong dislike for the other types of foods. So next difference between premenstrual syndrome and pregnancy is that there's sensitivity to food, but in pregnancy the sensitivity is only on one particular type of food, whereas in premenstrual syndrome there's basically sensitivity, or a woman will tend to eat many types of food, specifically sweets, sugars, and even chocolates. So we shall go to our next difference between premenstrual syndrome and pregnancy. Cramping. When a woman is about to see her periods, or in premenstrual syndrome there's cramping. This is abdominal pain. It's also called dysmenorrhea, or pain towards or pain during your periods. The only difference between premenstrual cramping and pregnancy cramping, or premenstrual pain abdominal pain and pregnancy abdominal pain is that in premenstrual syndrome, the pains or the cramping is really so serious, whereas when a woman has got pregnant, there's some slight cramping, a sign that implantation or a baby has formed. So normally the biggest difference is that there's actually cramping, but in premenstrual syndrome the cramping is very serious, whereas in pregnancy the cramping is not so serious. Our takeaway lesson for today is that there are lots of differences, but here we've mentioned what we really see that it is very key. There are lots of differences between premenstrual syndrome and pregnancy symptoms, but we've picked out what is really very important. And in summary, we've talked about breast pain as being our first difference. We've talked about bleeding. We've talked about mood changes. We've talked about fatigue. We've talked about nausea. We've talked about food. We've talked about cramping. All these are very key to understand the difference between premenstrual syndrome and pregnancy symptoms. Thank you for staying with me. Remember to hit the subscribe button for new videos we put out every day. Like, subscribe and share this video with all our friends so that they get to know this information about pregnancy and women health. The name of the channel is GERALDMASSA, the health educator. Thanks for passing by and have yourself a fantastic and healthy day. Bye bye.